Introducing Big J's toilet paper, the logger's choice. When you need that extra scrubbing power, Big J's toilet paper leaves you feeling fresh.
Big John, Big John, Big Bad John.
Hello folks, Logger John here, and we're back in the woodshed for another episode of Woodshed Ramblings. And today the topic is going to be, I'll let you guys guess. Any guesses? Today we're going to talk about tractors. And initially I was going to talk about what was the best tractor ever built. But after giving it some thought for the last week, I've decided not to go down that road. It's a hard question to answer. Every company had some good tractors. Every company had some bad tractors. We're going to try to stick to the older tractors from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s if we can. I don't want to start talking about any of the new tractors right now. I think we're going to, instead of using the question, what's the best tractor, I think we're just going to explore tractors that changed the industry. There's been a lot of them that's really changed the industry over the years and the decades, and I think we're going to focus on those tractors. I did make a list, I did some research. There's a lot of great information in some of these books. So I came up with a top 10 list of tractors that basically changed the industry for good. There's a lot of great inventions over the years, and if you go back to like the 30s and 40s, even the 50s, there was like literally hundreds of tractor companies. Like names, I can't even begin to name some of them. I mean, there's the main ones, you know, Ford and Massey and International and Case and David Brown and Alice Chalmer, Oliver, White, Caterpillar, probably forgetting a few, Minneapolis Moline. They were the main tractors of the 40s and 50s and 60s. The problem is a lot of the big companies were merged, were bought up by global companies. I think there's only a few independent companies left. I think John Deere and Caterpillar maybe. But we won't get into that too much today. What I want to focus on is the top 10 tractors that changed the industry. And we have lots to cover, and this might be a 2 or 3 part video, because it's pretty much impossible, for me anyway, to talk about tractors in 15 or 20 minutes on a 15 or 20 minute video. My daughter keeps telling me my videos are too long, they need to be shortened. She said 15 to 20 minutes. I agree with her. Anything longer than that, I find people don't watch maybe, unless it's really interesting. And I don't know how interesting my videos are, but I have a few people watching them. So I'm going to try to stick to 15 or 20 minutes and talk about the top 10 tractors and a few other things I want to talk about. So we got lots to cover, like I said, so I did make some notes, and we'll go through the top 10 tractors that changed the industry. And I made notes, because if I don't, I'll just forget what the heck I'm talking about. I'll just go through the whole list really fast. The Ford 9N is on my list. The Massey Ferguson 135. The John Deere 4440, that's the most modern tractor that's on my list. It was built in 1978 to 1982. The Oliver 70 is on my list. The Farmall M. Most of you people are familiar with the Farmall M. And the Ford 8N. Most of you people know what the Ford 8N looks like. The Ferguson Te 20 is on my list. The Fordson Model F is on my list. Now we're going way back there with that tractor. 1917 to 1928. And the Farmall regular tractor was built in 1924 to 1932. And the number one tractor that changed the industry, and this tractor was a very, very popular tractor, and it's still, you see a few of them around on the farms. They were reliable and durable, and yeah, they were a great tractor. And that tractor would be the John Deere 4020. The John Deere 4020. I believe it came in a gas model at the beginning and a diesel. Now it's a diesel. It was available in gas and diesel is what I'm trying to say. It was built from 63 to 72. It had 83 horsepower. So why did I pick some of these tractors? Well, get my notes straightened out here. The Ford 9N was built from 1939 to 1942. At that time it was about 16 horsepower, and it came with the Ford. It was called a Ford Ferguson. It was called a Ford 9N with the Ferguson system. Harry Ferguson and basically invented the three-point hitch system. He didn't really have a tractor at that time to put it on. He played around a little bit with David Brown. At that time, David Brown was a gear and wheel company. I think they made gears and wheels. Played around. They made a tractor with a system on it. He also played around and put them on the Fordson tractors a little bit on his own, but he didn't have a company of his own. So him and Henry, he met up with Henry Ford, the president of the Ford company, famous for their Model T, of course, and their cars. And they made a handshake deal. Basically, it was a handshake deal at the time. They came up with the deal that Ford supplied the tractors, Harry Ferguson supplied the three-point hitch system. They put them together. It was a popular tractor. It changed the way farming was done with the three-point hitch. You could, it was probably the biggest. The top invention in farming and farm tractors really was a three-point hitch system, and it lasted. That deal or that partnership lasted for only a few years. Henry Ford, his grandson, basically kind of took over the company, and I got bees flying around me in here. Get out of here! Trying to wreck my video here. Get out! Bees looking for a home. Anyways, what was I saying? The Ford, yeah, the Ferguson. So his grandson, Ford's grandson, kind of took over the company, and he basically didn't want much to do with Ferguson, Harry Ferguson. He ended the deal with the system for some reason. It was during the war, and I'm not really sure of all the details, but Harry Ferguson sued Ford for like a couple $100 million at the time. It was a lot of money. I think they settled for $12 million. Ferguson claimed his patent infringement from the Ford company on his three-point hitch system. At that time, Ford argued that the patent had ran out, which I think it did. They settled for whatever, 12 million or something out of court. There's lots. You can find lots of that on the internet or in books about the whole story. But basically, it ended the deal, the handshake deal. So it basically left Harry Ferguson without a tractor to put his system on. But at that time, the patent ran out. So anybody could basically use that system. So the next tractor that the Ford company built was the 2N, It was built in 1942. By the way, the 9N was built in 39. The N actually stands for, it's kind of weird, the N stands for, it's just, stands for tractor. In the Ford company at that time, they had different letters for different things, like I guess the Model T car, or the T stood for car. I'm not really sure why. I don't know why they chose the letter N for tractor, but it stood for tractor. So the 9N was built in 39, so the 9 stood for the year 39. 1942, the 2N, it was during the war. It was a scaled down tractor. It used, at the time, rubber was in short supply for rubber tires, so a lot of the tractors, the 2Ns, came with steel wheels, and they didn't even come with a battery. They had a magneto ignition. You had to hand crank them, and all these tractors were still, keep in mind, they were only 3-speed. The 9N and the 2N, they were only 3-speed. I don't think they had a high and low range either. And so after the war, they needed to come up with a better tractor, a newer tractor, and that's when then the 8N came into play. It was actually produced in 1947, but it didn't come up for sale till 1948, I believe. So hence the 8 number for the 8N, 1948. As the Ferguson 9N and the 2N were painted like a dark kind of gray. So when the Ford 8N came out, it had the gray hood and the gray fenders and the red belly, the red motor, and the red axles and stuff. Ferguson went on to make his own tractor company, the Ferguson Tractor Company. We'll get into that a little bit later. But that's why the 9N is on here. It was basically the first big production tractor with a 3-point hitch. Yeah, so now the Massey 135, you're probably all familiar with the Massey 135. They came in a diesel and a gas version. We never had one on the farm, but our neighbor had one. It was a great tractor. They came with the clamshell fenders, or the square top fenders later on. I think there was a British model and an American model. They're basically just a reliable, they're about 45 horsepower. They're built from 1964 to 1975, so they had a pretty long run. They're one of the most popular Massey Ferguson tractors built, even up until this day. They're durable, they're simple to use, and they're affordable and reliable. So, and you can go pretty much to any country in the world, any continent, and you'll find a Massey Ferguson 135 working. They're still working. They were just an all-around great tractor, and that was on my list. So that's why it's on my list. And the John Deere 4440, now that's a big tractor. We're moving ahead a few decades. It was built from 1978 to 1982. It was a big tractor. It was like over 100 horsepower. At that time, it was the most popular tractor from John Deere. It was called the Iron Horse series of tractors. They had one of the most reliable engines that John Deere produced. Most of them came with a cab, factory cab. They were a big tractor, and they're still, you see them are still working the fields around. Some of them with 15,000 hours on them, on the motors, on the engine, or on the tractors, and they're one of the, yeah. So that's why that's on my list. The Oliver 70. Now we're going back a few decades, 1935 and 1948. The Oliver 70. It was a basic tractor. It was 28 horsepower. At that time, it was one of the most loved tractors by farmers during the post-Depression years. Lots of power. It was known for its durability. It was known for its low fuel consumption too. and that's why it's on my list. And then the Farmall M is on my list. Built from 39 to 52, it was around 33 horsepower. It was one of the most popular Farmall letter series of tractors. There was over 290,000 built. So that tells you right there, there's a few around. And when I mean the letter series, they all letters like M. There was basically the A, B, there was A, B, C, H, and M were the tractors, and then each of those tractors had different variations and different options. But the M was the most popular tractor, the Farmall tractor. Then we go into the Ford 8N. We talked about the Ford 8N a little while ago. You're all pretty much familiar with them. The little gray tractors with the red body, or the red motor, and the red axles, and the red transmission. They're only around 21 horsepower. Almost every farm, every farm had one of these tractors. Like you drive back, we had one on the farm. My dad had one on the farm. Mostly used it for light work, like plowing the garden and that. But they were a tough little tractor. They're at the time, the most popular North American tractor of all time. So let that sink in for a few seconds. The most popular tractor in America of all time. There was 524,000 of them produced. They were affordable and reliable. They were basically, it's one thing about the Ford company, they made things that people could afford, like the Model T and the 9N and the 2N, and of course the 8N, built in 1948, or 47, but like I said before, didn't start selling them to 48. It basically that tractor did more to replace the horses than any other tractor in the history of farming. They're easy, and like I say, they were so reliable and durable. And with the 3-point hitch, they were versatile. Yeah, that's on my list, and we're moving on to the Ferguson Te-20. They basically look like the 9N, the 2N, the 8N, and the Ferguson Te-20. They all pretty much look the same size. The TE had a little bit more power, and it came with a 4-speed transmission. I believe the 8N still had a 3-speed transmission, and I don't think it had high and low range yet. And Harry Ferguson had the 3-point hitch on this Te-20. It was produced in England and the U.S. In the U.S. it was called the TO-20. There was 516,000 of these tractors built just in England alone, not including the American model. They had a little bit more to offer than the 8N. They had a better 3-point hitch system. It was modernized a little bit better, a little more power than the 8N. So it was a popular tractor. And we're moving on to the Fordson Model F. The Fordson Model F. The Fordson was a play on names, actually. There was Ford and his son, Henry Ford and his son at the time. It was built in 1917 to 1928, the Model F. When they sent telegrams at that time back and forth, the shorthand would be Ford. We're sending this telegram to Henry Ford and his son. Well, the short form, I guess, with telegram, it would just be Ford's son. And it kind of caught on, and they actually, somebody at Ford kind of liked it, and the name caught on. So that's what they named their tractor, believe it or not, the Ford's son. That's where that name came from. It's probably the most important tractor ever built at that time, the Fordson Model F. It was basically the Model T of tractors. What the Model T did for people to drive around and explore, drive around the country and open up the country, basically, the Model T. The Ferguson Model F tractor did the same to farming. It was a simple tractor to use. It was dependable, and look here, it was affordable to most farmers. I think at that time it was sold for like I think $500. Seems like a lot of money, but $400 or $500 you could buy a tractor, and it was reliable. And get this, let me get this straight here. It had there was 755,000 of these tractors built. 755,000 of these tractors were built and sold around the world. The Ferguson Model F. Hopefully on the video, when I go to edit it, I'm going to add some pictures of some of these tractors we're talking about here. So hope you let that sink in. 755,000 tractors, Ferguson Model F, were built around the world. That's crazy. But that's why it's on my list. And what else do we have on the list here? We have the Farmall Regular. It was a built from 1924 to 1932. It was revolutionary design as a row crop tractor. Its design became the foundation for all tractors that would follow it for decades. There was 135,000 of those built, and they were the Farmall Regular. I'll try to have a picture of that. Probably some of you guys aren't familiar with that tractor. You will when you see the picture, probably. And what else is on my list here? I'll go through my list. We talked about that, and we talked about that. I do have a few honorable mentions before we get to the #1 tractor